If you agree that those who are underestimated often carry the greatest strength within them, like and subscribe, because what you're about to hear is proof that sometimes the ones pushed aside are the very ones fate calls when it matters most. They said she wasn't good enough, that she didn't belong, that her place was behind a desk while others carried the weight of command. And yet, when the hour came and lives were on the line, the Admiral himself didn't call the best-ranked cadets. He came in person, for her. It didn't start with glory, though. It started with silence, and whispers that cut sharper than blades. Lieutenant Maya Reyes, late 20s, sharp-eyed and steady-handed, had walked through the gates of the academy with more real-world experience than most of her peers could dream of. While they bragged about family legacies in the Navy, Maya had already served tours in hostile waters, already patched wounds under fire, already led sailors out of impossible corners. But the cadets around her didn't see that. They saw a woman who didn't quite fit their picture of leadership. They saw someone younger than the stories of valor she carried, someone they could brush aside. They laughed in the halls, made comments just loud enough for her to hear. Paper soldier, decorated on pity, quota pick. Every slight drove deeper, not because she believed them, but because she knew how easily a lie, repeated enough, can grow into the truth people accept. Still, Maya did what she always did. Showed up before dawn, stayed long after the halls emptied, combed over tactical maps until her eyes burned. Her commanders knew she was reliable, disciplined, unshakable. But reliability wasn't glamorous, and in the politics of who got chosen for the Academy's elite mission planning team, glamour mattered. The cadets who strutted in immaculate uniforms, who boasted about their fathers' and grandfathers' ranks, were paraded forward. Maya, despite outperforming them in simulations, was quietly shuffled to the side. She was asked to support instead of lead, to assist instead of command. They called it an opportunity to learn, but everyone knew it was exile in plain sight. And yet, there was something about her silence that unsettled them. She didn't argue, didn't lash out, didn't beg. She listened, observed, memorized. When her name was absent from the mission board, she nodded once, as if it confirmed what she already expected, and went back to her work. That quiet resolve gnawed at the cadets who mocked her, though they would never admit it. Because deep down, they feared that silence. They feared what it might mean, that Maya Reyes knew something they didn't, that she was preparing for a test bigger than any of them could see. The test came sooner than anyone imagined. A storm brewed, not of weather, but of conflict. Intelligence suggested movements offshore, a situation volatile enough to demand precision, expertise, and calm under pressure. The Academy's so-called best were summoned to prepare. The cadets puffed out their chests, already imagining their names etched into reports, already writing speeches in their minds about how they had been chosen for the critical mission. And still, Maya's name was nowhere on the list. She remained in the shadows of the strategy room, studying maps she hadn't been invited to brief, calculating outcomes she wasn't asked to present. That's where the story should have ended. Another overlooked soldier, another talent buried under politics and pride. But fate, as it so often does, had other plans. Because in moments of true crisis, pomp and privilege fall away, and only one thing matters: who can be trusted when everything is on the line? And that is when the impossible happened. Not a phone call, not an email, not even a summons through the chain of command. The air shifted one quiet afternoon when the door to the strategy hall opened, and footsteps, measured, heavy, deliberate, echoed across the marble floor. Every cadet turned, every voice caught in their throat, because standing there, in full-dress uniform, was Admiral Carson himself. The man whose presence was usually felt only through speeches on screens or signatures on orders. The man whose decisions carved the shape of wars. He had come in person, but he hadn't come for them. This was the beginning of the moment that would silence every mocking word and rewrite every assumption about Maya Reyes. The room froze as Admiral Carson stepped through the doors. His presence carried a weight that no textbook, no lecture, no academy tradition could ever match. His medals didn't glint as ornaments. They shone as reminders of decades lived in the crucible of war. The cadets straightened instinctively, their arrogance evaporating into stiff salutes, their rehearsed confidence faltering under the Admiral's gaze. But Carson didn't return their salute. He didn't look at the carefully selected mission team clustered around the main table, their uniforms pristine, their folders stacked high with notes they thought would impress him. His eyes moved past them, scanning the room with the practiced calm of a man who had once walked through smoke and fire and come out alive. The silence stretched, thick as concrete. And then, to the shock of every cadet standing there, the Admiral's gaze locked on Maya Reyes. Her breath caught, though her posture never wavered. She hadn't expected this. She had spent years convincing herself that recognition might never come, that her role was to carry the weight quietly while others claimed the spotlight. And yet here he was, the highest authority many of them would ever stand before, and he was walking directly toward her. "Lieutenant Reyes," Admiral Carson said, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. Dozens of eyes swung toward her, disbelief written on every face. The cadets who had mocked her the loudest now shifted uncomfortably, their jaws tightening, their pride cracking. "Yes, sir," Maya replied, steady, controlled. The Admiral stopped in front of her, close enough that the faint scent of salt water seemed to follow him, a reminder of the sea that defined them both. He studied her for a moment, not with doubt, but with certainty, as if he had been waiting for this meeting. "I've read your record," Carson said. "Not the one in the Academy files. The real one. The deployments they don't mention in the reports handed around this room. I know about the rescue in the Gulf, the night you led men twice your age to safety when comms went down. I know about the coded intercepts you cracked when others failed. I know you didn't do it for recognition. You did it because the mission needed to succeed." Maya felt the stares burning into her from every side, but she didn't flinch. Carson's voice dropped lower, deliberate, carrying the kind of authority that leaves no room for question. "That's why I'm here. Not for them." He glanced briefly toward the cadets at the table, their faces pale with confusion. "For you." The room erupted into whispers, but a single look from the Admiral silenced them. He reached into the inner pocket of his uniform, withdrawing a sealed folder, heavy with the weight of classified ink. He placed it in Maya's hands, the gesture deliberate, undeniable. "This mission is critical," Carson said. "Lives depend on it, and I will not entrust it to anyone else. You're the one I've chosen to lead the operation planning." The cadets stared in stunned silence. For weeks they had strutted, certain their names would be etched into glory, but now they were watching that glory slip away into the hands of the one they dismissed, belittled, ignored. One cadet, braver, or perhaps more foolish than the others, cleared his throat. "Sir, with respect, she wasn't even on the team roster." His voice trembled as soon as the words left his mouth. Carson turned his head slowly, fixing the cadet with a stare so sharp it seemed to cut through him. Then the roster was wrong. His words fell like a hammer, final and immovable. "Do you think wars are won by rosters? By popularity? Or are they won by the ones who keep their head when the fire is real, when every second counts, when hesitation costs lives?" The cadet dropped his gaze, ashamed, the arrogance drained from him in an instant. Carson turned back to Maya, his expression softening, if only slightly. "I came here because I wanted you to hear this from me, face to face. You've earned this, Lieutenant, and I trust you to carry it out." Maya's hands tightened around the folder. For years she had carried her strength quietly, unseen, unacknowledged. Now, standing in front of the Admiral, that weight transformed into something else, responsibility. She met his eyes, and for the first time, allowed herself to believe that maybe all the silence, all the restraint, had been leading to this very moment. "Yes, Admiral," she said. "I won't fail you." A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I know." He turned, his coat sweeping as he strode from the room, leaving behind a silence so profound it roared louder than any applause. The cadets who had laughed at her sat frozen, their faces a mix of envy and shame. No one dared to speak. No one dared to meet her eyes. Maya stood still for a moment longer, the folder heavy in her grasp. Then she walked forward, past the stunned team, past the table that had excluded her, past the whispers that had defined her for too long. Every step was steady, deliberate, a quiet declaration that she no longer needed their permission to belong. She had the Admiral's trust, and that was more than enough. This was the moment her story changed. The mocking voices no longer mattered. What mattered was the mission, the lives depending on her, and the truth that had finally been revealed. She was never unworthy. She was chosen. She was ready. The mission began in silence. No grand speeches, no fanfare, just the low hum of machines and the steady flicker of lights in the operations room. Lieutenant Maya Reyes stood at the center of it, the sealed folder now opened before her, its contents spread across the table like the pieces of a puzzle only she could solve. The cadets who had once laughed at her now sat in the room as subordinates, their pride swallowed, their eyes fixed on her as she outlined the plan. Her voice was calm, measured, deliberate. She didn't rush. She didn't need to. Every move, every adjustment she made to the strategy came from experience, not the kind that fills exam papers, but the kind earned through nights without sleep, through choices made when failure meant death. At first, the cadets fidgeted, unwilling to accept her authority. But as she spoke, something shifted. The way she laid out contingencies, the way she anticipated risks before they even surfaced, the way she carried the room without raising her voice, commanding respect not through force, but through certainty. By the time she finished, there was no doubt. This was her mission. They were simply fortunate enough to follow. And when the operation began, every word she had spoken became prophecy. The crisis offshore escalated faster than predicted. Communications were garbled, weather turned hostile, and enemy maneuvers threatened to fracture the plan. Panic flickered in the eyes of the young officers at the consoles, their fingers trembling over controls. But Maya didn't flinch. She moved through the room like a steady current, redirecting, correcting, adjusting the mission on the fly. Her orders were precise, sharp, never wasted. Vector 3, adjust your course. Hold position for 30 seconds, then advance on my mark. Team Bravo, you're exposed. Fall back 2 clicks and wait for reinforcement. Signal command vessel, switch to channel Delta. Trust me. They trusted her. And the impossible began to unfold. Moves that should have failed held together. Traps meant to ensnare their forces crumbled under her foresight. The mission that had seemed destined for disaster bent itself toward success. Every outcome driven by the clarity of one woman who refused to break under pressure. The cadets who had mocked her watched in silence, their shame deepening with every order she gave. They had doubted her worth, and now they sat inside history being written by her hand. Not one of them dared to speak against her. Not when lives depended on her voice. Not when her every decision proved she belonged here more than any of them ever did. Hours passed. The storm raged. The conflict reached its breaking point. And then, finally, it ended. The enemy line cracked. The objective secured. The lives they had fought to protect safe. Against the odds, against the doubts, against the arrogance of those who tried to bury her, Maya Reyes had led them through. When the final report was filed, it was her name that marked the operation's success. Days later, the academy gathered in the hall for a formal debrief. The cadets lined the rows, their uniforms sharp, their faces unreadable. The ones who had mocked her stood stiff, caught between resentment and guilt, unsure how to face her now. At the front of the room stood Admiral Carson. His presence, once again, silenced every whisper. He spoke not of the cadets, not of tradition, not of the Academy's legacy. He spoke of Maya Reyes. In my years of service, he said, his voice firm, I have seen soldiers rise and fall. I have seen those praised in the light falter when the shadows closed in. But Lieutenant Reyes, she carried herself with the strength of one who does not need applause. She acted when others hesitated. She fought when others froze. And she led when others mocked. That is what makes a leader. That is what saves lives. The words struck like thunder. The cadets shifted uncomfortably, their shame visible now, their arrogance laid bare under the Admiral's truth. Carson turned, his eyes finding Maya where she stood among the rows, not in front, not demanding the spotlight, but exactly where she had always been. Ready, waiting, steady. He motioned for her to step forward. Maya walked to the front of the hall, her every step echoing in the silence. She didn't walk with swagger. She didn't need to. She carried herself the same way she always had. Calm, deliberate, unshaken. The Admiral placed his hand on her shoulder. Lieutenant Reyes, he said, his tone softer now, but filled with respect. This Navy is stronger because of you. Let no one tell you otherwise. And then, in front of the entire academy, he pinned the commendation to her uniform. The hall erupted in applause, not the forced kind, but the raw, undeniable kind that comes when even pride must bow to truth. The cadets who had once whispered behind her back now clapped with the rest, their eyes lowered, their arrogance shattered. They knew the truth now, a truth they could never erase. The one they tried to push aside had been chosen over all of them, had proven herself beyond question. Maya didn't bask in it. She didn't smile or gloat. She simply nodded, acknowledging the Admiral, then the room, then quietly stepping back. Because for her, this wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about fulfilling the duty she had always been ready for. That night, as the academy emptied, a few of the cadets lingered in the shadows, waiting until the hall was nearly silent before approaching her. They didn't carry arrogance anymore. Their voices were low, their words awkward, but sincere. "You led well," one said. "You saved lives," another admitted. A third simply whispered, "We were wrong." Maya didn't linger on their shame. She gave them the same quiet nod she always had, the same calm silence that had carried her through years of being overlooked. And then she walked past them, steady and unshaken, into the night. Because she didn't need their approval anymore. She never had. The Admiral had chosen her. The mission had proven her. And history would remember her not as the woman they mocked, but as the leader who rose when it mattered most. And that is the story of Maya Reyes, the soldier they kept off the team, until the Admiral himself came in person and the world finally saw what she had been all along.